No matter what I aspired to be in life, I always wanted to be a television talk show host. I just never thought I'd ever get a chance because only the rich and famous, the well known, they hold those positions on major networks. So I thought to myself, I may never be famous, may never get any money from it, but somehow I still could fulfill a dream that would allow me to create a space and a place where people could come together to professionally discuss different topics that are relevant to everyday life. Ordinary people making a difference in the life of someone else, which might actually save a life. And so, here we are, Conversations with Dr. Mike. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Mike. I am so apologetic this evening for being the show starting late. Please keep our family in prayer as we have had to make some very tough decisions. And so I made it, and that's what's most important, and I made it safely back home. But please keep our family in prayer. Well, I am very excited tonight for the panel discussion on tonight. We have a full panel, and we have a hot and heavy conversation that we're going to pick up from last night. I'm asking everybody if you would please like and share this video. If you could send it out on your Facebook pages and let people know that we are streaming live, and so that they can send it out on their pages. My first guest tonight is no stranger to Conversations with Dr. Mike. He is a miracle in the making, and let me just say, he is doing some phenomenal work right here in Baton Rouge. And so I'm very excited about him being on the show tonight. And so again, welcome to all our viewers to Conversations with Dr. Mike. This is part 2 of Kings and Educating and Nurturing Black and Brown Boys. And so my first guest tonight is none other than Dr. Javon Thomas. And so we're going to bring him on so that we can talk about some of the great things that he's doing with his mentoring program. Welcome, Dr. Thomas. How are you this evening?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
Great, thank you. So I wanted to bring you on first because I wanted to talk about the great work that you're doing with your mentoring program. I know it's up and coming and evolving, but you are getting it started. And so tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your mentoring program and how you're actually impacting young Black men at Southern University here, the home of the Jaguars, the best, of course, that we have in the state of Louisiana, the home of the Jaguars. That's my alma mater. But no offense to all of those Grambling Knights that might be out there. But talk to us a little bit about your mentoring program that you're evolving.
Okay, well, the name of my mentoring company is Distinguished Sons of Promise, and it caters to young males ages 10 to 12 so far. And I launched it in April, but due to COVID-19, I haven't been able to recruit any students to participate. But as soon as COVID-19 is over, we can get the ball rolling with that. But my program is going to cater to those youth who are considered fatherless, meaning that their father is incarcerated or have passed away. Okay. And I know the importance of mentoring due to my role at Southern University. I'm assistant director of first and second year experience, and I'm also adjunct faculty there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Southern University, as well with your mentoring.
It really started my very first semester. I was teaching freshman seminar, and some of the males in my freshman seminar class started to migrate towards me. And I think that's one of the perks of working at a HBCU is you get that nurturing that you wouldn't necessarily get elsewhere. And so I'm a graduate of an HBCU undergraduate degree, and I know the type of love and the support that was in place for me. And so that's what I try to give back to my students there. And once they see that you care for them and that you have their best interest at heart, those walls come down. And most times you are the first positive Black male role model that they see. So they tend to cling to you. And I take it as another job, but to me, it's really not a job because it's something that I truly enjoy doing, and I'm really hands on. I mentor holistically. I'm there for step shows, probates, pinning ceremonies, honor societies, family gatherings. Some didn't stay with me for summer school, so I do it all, and I'm very proud and happy to be doing it.
Wonderful. So, when it comes to nurturing and a black males, what have been some of the things that you have seen that some of them are entering college lacking, and how they have actually grown under your tutelage and leadership?
I would say one of the main things would be self confidence, um, and I would say support. Um, Meaning self confidence, meaning that a lot of them they're in their shell. They don't explore and go out and do other things, and that's what I try to teach them and show them. I come from the same place you come from. You know, I'm a product of the projects, but look at me, so you don't have to be a product of your environment. There's more out there, and sometimes some people just need a push. That's all they need is a push and someone to stay on them to reach their full potential. And that's what I have done. And I've been working there since fall of 16. And my first graduating class was this past May. And it's truly a full circle rewarding experience to see when they first come in the fall semester and how they grow, mature, and matriculate those years in undergrad. Now they're about to begin their careers and come into their own self as a young man. So that's what I love most about it. You get to see that growth.
And so as a result of the work that you have done, what would be some recommendations that you might give to parents, and saying to parents things that they need to be looking out for or doing right now while their children are in elementary school, even as young as kindergarten, first, second, third grade? What are some things they should be doing right now?
First and foremost, I would say communicate. Communicate with your kids. Ask them what's going on, how they're doing. Get involved. Know their teachers, because parents are the first educators. They learn at home first. So that's what I would recommend for parents to do, is to educate and communicate to their kids, and also get them involved. Pay attention, learn what their interests are, and build upon that. If you see that your kid is good at drawing, enroll them into artistic classes. Buy them some blank canvases, let them explore, let them paint. So things like that. So just really paying attention and keeping those lines of communication open with your kid.
Okay. Well, Dr. Thomas, we are always excited to have you on the show, and you're actually going to be joining the panel. So, good luck with the mentoring that you're doing and getting the program started. And certainly, we're going to have you to come back to share with us. We realize that once COVID is, subdued a little bit, then you will be able to get out there and really do what you need to do. But thank you so much again, and we'll be bringing you back on with the panel. Let's folks, let's like and share this video, and please push it out there. Let people know that we are live streaming live, talking about kings, talking about educating and nurturing Black and brown boys. And please push this video out. So we will be right back in just a moment. I am excited about the panel tonight. I'm very excited about this panel tonight. I mean, we really have some conversation that we're going to have, but we have panelists who across the United States that are going to bring some expertise to this. We have Dr. Lorenzo Hughes, who we are going to be bringing in. He's no stranger to conversations with Dr. Mike, and each of them will say a little bit and introduce themselves when they come on. Welcome, Dr. Hughes. We have Dr. Ford, who I'm very, very excited about being a part of this panel for tonight. Welcome, Dr. Ford. We have Mr. Wells, who is coming from Massachusetts. Dr. Ford is over in Pennsylvania. Dr. Hughes is in Maryland.
I'm in Jersey.
New Jersey. Yes. So welcome, Mr. Wells.
Welcome.
And Dr. Thomas is going to be joining us. So welcome back, Dr. Thomas.
Welcome.
And I am also excited about this gentleman here because he is a Louisiana native and right in the city of New Orleans, Louisiana. And he brings a expertise of educating Black boys in New Orleans. And so we're excited to hear about what he's is. So welcome, Mr. Jackson, to Conversations with Dr. Mike. Let's get right into it. Dr. Hughes, we're going to start off with you introducing yourself and telling the viewers a little bit about you. You're no stranger to us, of course. And so, and then we'll go to Dr. Ford.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Robinson, thank you so much. Dr. Mike, thank you for the invitation. I am Lorenzo Hughes. I hail from Maryland, and I do have experience from the classroom to the boardroom, having been a classroom teacher at both the middle and high school level, did some adjunct work. I've been an assistant principal, an assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction, and currently I work as a senior manager for school support and equitable practices with Anne Arundel County Public Schools. We've got 126 schools, 85,000 students. And so it's my job to work along with executive and school-based administration to ensure that equitable practices permeate throughout the district. And so having a good time making sure that we get what's due us that has been deprived of us for so long. So I'm pleased tonight to share the panel with these august men.
Awesome. Dr. Ford.
Dr. Mike, I thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to be here amongst these fine Black men and scholars in their own right. My name is Dr. David Julius Ford Jr. I'm an assistant professor of professional counseling at Monmouth University on the beautiful Jersey Shore. I'm a licensed counselor in North Carolina, Virginia, and in New Jersey. I'm also the president-elect of the New Jersey Counseling Association. And I'm on the board of directors of the LGBTQ Scholars of Color Network. And most of my work lies in supporting Black men in college, specifically those that attend predominantly white institutions. I study a lot of Black Greek life. I'm a proud, active, and financial member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, the only fraternity known to man. The others merely pale in comparison.
We're not going to go there.
I think that you would have some argument because we do have some others on the platform.
Yes,
so
yes, we do.
Here's the argument,
but we do know that Kappa Alpha Psi rules tonight.
Yes, sir.
Lest we forget, had it not been for 06, nothing else would have come after. I just want to
Let him know. Let him know.
Lorenzo. You know what's going on.
Read my dissertation, Dr. Hughes. You might be enlightened. I also do a lot of work supporting Black and brown members of the LGBTQ community and Black and brown men who are HIV positive. I'm a substance abuse counselor and career counselor by trade, and I do a lot with mentoring young Black and brown men who have expressed interest in going to the counseling profession. And so I'm trying to make our profession Black as fuck.
Wonderful. Mr. Wells.
Yes. How y'all doing? So I'm Darren T. Wells from Boston, Massachusetts. Currently, I'm in Montclair, New Jersey, visiting my mom. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, so let's clear that up. And then I'm also a science department chair and an instructional teacher leader for Boston Public Schools. This is my 29th year. I'm a member of Concerned Black Men. I've been a recording secretary for the last, I'd say, 15 years since its inception in 1989. I'm also a member of ADOTI, which is a same-gender loving group that we do retreats, so I'm on that committee. I'm also a member of BEAM, which is a Black Educators Alliance of Massachusetts. And I also am currently working on a behavior art program this summer. And I have a 10 Boys Initiative program that I do annually. And I also do work for the state as well as local in regards to science and STEM education.
Awesome. Dr. Thomas.
Hello, everyone. My name is Javon Thomas. I am an assistant director of first and second year experience and also adjunct faculty at Southern University and A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I have a social work background, so I was a school social worker for a number of years, and I also taught middle school math. And I transitioned into higher ed about 6 years ago, and my work solely focuses on helping first year and second year students successfully transition from high school and also successfully matriculate through the university. And I'm also a proud life member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
He's doing it.
That's okay. All right. Mr. Jackson, welcome.
Hey there. Good evening, everybody. How's it going? My name is Lawrence Jackson. I am a proud member of Me Phi Me.
Yes.
In college for my life, so I don't hold that against any of you guys. I'll just start with that. But I am an educator, a second career educator after spending 20 years in healthcare. Decided I had enough, went into education, spent the last 9 years there. I actually worked in several schools over that time, but finished off the last 3 years at an all-boys K-8 school that was the first of its kind in our area. Did that for 3 years, so I've got a rather unique perspective on the K-8 experience of our young boys and how to get them on the straight and narrow. Currently, I'm serving as Chief of Staff and Administration at STEM NOLA, which is a local STEM education provider. We provide STEM experiences to young people in the community, directly in the community, with our programming. So we have serviced over 40,000 kids in the last 7 years. So it's a progression of my experience to be able to bring my administrative experience from education to a new platform, combine that with my corporate experience in my prior life. And here I am now impacting the lives of even more students at this point as we expose them to STEM and to the possibilities that exist within them.
Absolutely. I am a huge proponent of STEAM, which is a part of STEM. You're adding the arts into that process as well. We are now in 2020, and yet we're still having the same conversations that we were having 50 years ago. Why do you think that we're still having these same conversations around inequities and race?
White privilege is not going anywhere. I mean, white folks are the same, and they either don't acknowledge their privilege or don't want to relinquish it, and they still see us as inhuman and second-class citizens. I really love the work of Dr. Ibram Kendi, and he says that being not racist is not enough. They have to be anti-racist, and couple that with some other ideologies out there about white fragility and white privilege. I think that the emphasis starts with the folks that created the racist system that we live in. The other part is we have to also mentor the younger generation so that they can grow up and and part of my French and shake shit up. We've got some good black men out there that are doing the things. I mean, look at the six of us, and all of us touch young black men in some way. We have to ensure that those young black men that we're mentoring are prepared to deal with the system and to survive and thrive, and also hold white folks to the fire. If they're really going to be advocates and partner with us, then they have to really do that. That's just my take on it.
Well, let me jump in here at this point right quickly.
Anyone else on the panel like?
Absolutely. If you don't mind, Doc, I'll jump in right quickly. I'll just say that it's not just the Caucasian side of our society, but some of us as well. Some of us are just as guilty of perpetuating some of the same systems that have never changed. We get into the system. We decide that we're going to stake a claim in that system. We work through that system, but we don't change the system. And I think in direct answer to your question, why are we still dealing with it at least 50 years later? Well, actually, it's almost 100 years later, because the same systems that were in existence way back then are still pretty much in existence now. I take education, for instance. The education system has not changed in over 100 years. It's still the same model. One person standing up in a classroom and doing this to their students. And it's a struggle to break out of that. It's a struggle to actually evolve and change. So I just want to caution us that sometimes it's not just those of us who, it's not just the other side that is perpetuating it, but it's also sometimes we ourselves who don't choose to make changes.
Very interesting point that you would bring that out and say that Black people, the same Black people that are marching for Black Lives Matter, the same Black people that perpetuate that white people are doing certain things to them, the same Black people who are actually doing the same things to them, to Black people. So it's just amazing that you would bring that point out. But we're going to dive deeper into it. Other panel members, what are your thoughts?
Typically when I do Equity PD, I always end with a quote from Dr. Ron Edmonds back in 1979 when he said, "We can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to do this. Whether or not we do it must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we haven't done it so far." He said this back in 1979 at the Nation at Risk report that was looking at how we were changing in education. And I would proffer to say that the education, unfortunately, of the African American students holistically is not of interest to enough people. Going back since Dr. Ford mentioned Dr. Kendi's work in his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, he talks about and he cautions us to, in our conversations about the achievement gap, realizing that we are asking our Black kids to be measured by white students, and so we're measuring them by white students, and the curriculum is not even representative of them for the most part. And so until we get culturally responsive teaching, culturally responsive pedagogy, and a curriculum that reflects those students, that causes them to be celebrated and not see it as being marginalized, then I don't think that to hold up standardized testing or testing of any sort, I don't think it serves us well. Because if we test a fish on how well it climbs a tree, it's never going to be successful, right? And so I think it's important that we do make sure that we have curriculums that are in tune to what the kids are interested in, relates to them, and then of course the kids will have a chance to thrive. And so we need to make sure that we are doing it. We need to make sure that we are being anti-racist, as going back to Dr. Kennedy's work, and making sure that we are. Because he lets you know there's that dichotomy of being either racist or anti-racist, and are we doing things to interrupt policies and whatnot and that have been in place that actually continue to marginalize us. So it continues to go on because no one has really holistically. Well, I should say this. On a grander scale, because there are people who are actually doing it. There are pockets of places that's actually doing it, but until we holistically realize that we need to do something about this, and that should not be the norm, then it won't change.
Mr. Wells, I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, I think it's not only interesting, but it's like, do we really want and expect certain things to happen? So if we really want and expect things to happen, we can't do what we've always done, and we have to be prepared to do the change. So, I'm in Boston, Massachusetts. Everything that is an experimental comes to Boston Public Schools. You won't do this in Cambridge. You won't do this in Newton. You won't do this in other communities. And the question asks, why? Well, you have to look at, what does the assessment say? Where are the opportunities for us to really look at making improvement? Well, if you ask, why don't you go to other communities? Why don't you tamper with them? Why don't you put charter schools, no offense, in their communities? And the question is, their parents and the engagement in their houses are not going to be affected the way they are affected in Boston. So when we talk about what are the changes that's going to need to occur, we have to be realistic about the healthy conversations that are now unhealthy and uncomfortable. That does not always happen because it doesn't affect their children. And so everything comes to bottom line, and everything comes to the reality of, how does this impact your child? And if it doesn't impact your child, a lot of times you're not interested, unfortunately.
Now, I want to touch on two things right here. Number one, I want to go back to what Mr. Jackson said relative to the fact that sometimes, and Dr. Ford, sometimes as Black people, we are doing the same things that someone else is doing. And I know that we are marching right now, and with protests around the fact that Black Lives Matter, or actually it is all Black Lives Matter. But why is it that we are marching for equality? Many of the things that Dr. Hughes has talked about, we're marching for equality because we're tired of the things that have been done to us. But why is it that Black people, not all, some, not all, but why is it that Black people do more to hurt Black people than anyone else could do to us? And then when something happens, we then are upset because someone of another race, and particularly white people, have done to us, but yet we have done the same, if not worse, to ourselves and to our own people.
I'm going to take a step.
I'm just asking a question. Just asking a question.
So I'm going to take a stab at this. And so I'll give a scenario. Let's just talk about conditioning. So okay. I am an African-American male that predominantly I can walk into many buildings in Boston Public Schools and I can create an environment that's very conducive to learning in most classrooms. However, if I go to another community, that may not be the same. So let's be very, very transparent about what we call conditioning. So if I snatch up a person who looks like me, that person clearly understands that's what care looks like. That means they've done something inappropriate. Yes, now my job is, I'm not a police officer, so my job is now online. But I'll say that there is an understanding that happens in our community when a person of color, especially a Black man, addresses another Black man, especially if you pull them out and have a one-on-one conversation. So when we talk about what happens with us, a lot of times they don't have the role model and they don't understand what's going on. So they're following social media, fact. And then they're trying to emulate something that they still don't know what it is, fact. So when we talk about how do we hold ourselves accountable, let's be very transparent about what is the conditioning of these young people and what is their reality. So when we have these conversations about what's going on in our community is going through hell. So let's be very transparent. There's a lot of things that's going on that's systematic. This is not checkers, this is chess. So over a long period of time, this has been planned out. This is not going on with 1 year or 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. This is over 20 to 40 to 100 years. It's a systemic event that consistently occurs. And unfortunately, a lot of people are just like the animal that's trying to get out the glass. They're giving up. And so when they try to think about who am I going to really latch out to, you go to the people who are closest to you. So unfortunately, it's the people who look like you. So when people say, why do we have Black on Black crime? They got to get it out. And unfortunately, they're only going to get it out, unfortunately, in our own community. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm not saying it's the way it is, but we need to understand what is the sociological impact of what's really going on in our communities and what's the underlying events that perpetuate this. And so there's a lot to be talked about what goes on in our community, not to say it's right, not to say everything is wrong, but there's a systemic event that's consistently occurring that's making this happen. We're not bringing drugs into our community because we don't own planes and we don't own boats.
And to piggyback off of Mr. Wells, you brought up a good point about the whole quote unquote Black on Black crime, which they meant perpetuated by white media to make us look bad. But if you look at how those things break down, an interracial crime happens at the same. Actually, it happens more in white neighborhoods than ours. But you never hear anybody talk about white on white crime. So we have to dispel that myth that makes us look like we're the villains, that we're criminal, and that we're savages, that we're thugs, because it happens at the same rate in all communities. And the last time I checked, it happens more among white people than among us. And then I love what you said. A lot, like if you take a group of people and put them in a community that's already disadvantaged and give them low resources. And a lot of predominantly Black neighborhoods are food deserts, they're medical deserts, there's mental health deserts, and you give them a small amount of resources, what's going to happen? They're all going to start fighting over the same resources. And they have this, and I hate to use this phrase, the crab in the barrel mentality.
That's it. That's what they have.
Yeah. And so, you can't blame the oppressed because of the tools of the oppressor. But yeah, there's some of us, because I grew up in the projects too. My grandmother raised me. We want government assistance and everything. And I had some opportunities, but that doesn't mean my life was not rife with some struggles because of my Blackness. So even though we've made it, that is no indication that Black people still, Black people don't have to struggle anymore, because we do. So you really can't, place all the blame on what happens between and among Black people.
It's conditioning. It's conditioning.
It's conditioning. And I still say that, even though the media may say that, we are not together, baby, I got a different story for you, because I've seen the work that we're doing, and I see that we would not be this far if we were not together.
I think it's interesting that, and I kind of share some of those viewpoints, but I think it's interesting that when we think about why we do what we do to ourselves, that we have to consider the fact that uh, chains must be broken. And if we don't do the job that we need to do to ensure that the chains around our minds are broken, then we are not necessarily trying to get out of the situation as much as we are further perpetuating it. What do I mean? Well, in particular, we've got to create somehow the mechanisms so that our children, that next generation, sees and experiences something different in their experience. And that is where the tremendous challenge lies. How do we get our young people to experience something different within a system that has remained the same? And that goes back to my previous point, which is that the systems were designed to keep us down. And yet, even though we enjoy as a people a lot more opportunity, we have not necessarily historically as a people taken advantage of that opportunity. We are allowed in many more doors today. We are allowed all the way up through the corporate C-suites today. But yet the question and the issue is, what do we do once we get there? Do we settle in and think that we've arrived and no longer be concerned about those who have yet to come behind us? Or do we try to change some of the attitudes and the stigmas and those things that perpetuate the myths that we were just mentioning? And I think that's where we begin to see the impact. If we would all just come together and understand that the way out of this mess is to change the environment for those who come behind us.
So
I think, Miss.
So I want to bring up one of our viewers, Clarence Raleigh, great guy. I've been knowing Clarence for since we were all kids. He makes a very interesting point. He says, interesting that there's a panel of men varying fraternities tonight. We won't talk about the fact that not all of them are Kappas, but there's an obvious sense of pride and belonging, which are very critical elements, to that are missing in the young Black lives that should be considered as points of discussion. Without senses of pride and belonging and an object of our platform to ascribe people tend to suffer from hopelessness. The same thing applies when rejection comes from platforms outside of their community, which they usually feel is all that there is. Then one of our other viewers says, Lynette, the media plays a huge role. I want to go back to, again, why is it that we as Black people do more or give the appearance that we do more to harm our own than anybody else can do or has done to us? I'll tell you this a little bit before you answer. We were taught, when I wrote my first book, Educating the Endangered Species, the Black Male, when I wrote that first book, in this book, I mentioned the Willie Lynch syndrome story. If you're not familiar with Willie Lynch taught slave owners how to pit their slaves against one another. The light against the dark, the tall against the short, the old against the young. So we were taught, and as I'm working on my second book, I'm watching Roots again because I'm using scenes from that to accentuate parts of the book. And we were actually captured by order of white people, but who did the work? We did, to capture our own people. So why is it in all that we're doing, we're marching for Black lives, all lives. We're trying to educate our people, especially our boys, because they are the kings. They are the heads of the family. They are the leaders. If we cut the head off, the body dies. So why is it that we do that?
Go.
Thank you, Fred. I do think that what Ms. Tolliver said is correct. We got to watch the media because I don't necessarily ascribe to that. We're mostly doing it to ourselves. I think that is exacerbated in the media because that's what they want us to portray. Because as you said to your childhood friend there, I think his name was Clarence, as in the fraternities, even though we have this bantering back and forth like we did, genuinely, it's all love between all of us because we realize that when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. And so within our community, we understand that, again, really it's just us, right? Because we can get no justice. So it's just us. And so typically we are trying to help each other. And so, this Black Lives Movement, I think, pushes it a bit more. Now, are there factions within our community where we have suffered at the hands of us? Absolutely. But I think such is the case in all communities as well. But anytime the media has a chance to portray us in a negative light, that's what's going to happen. So we have to understand the value of us. I will say that the family structure is something that is quite different than, there is no big papas and big mamas anymore. And so when the family unit, I come from a family where, there was a strong mother, there was a strong father. And I always knew who my mother and father was, and the grandparents. And of course, they talked about the importance of community and building. And we don't have that anymore. And so society has a way of tearing up that faction of us. And so we then again come after we come after ourselves. And as far as that hopelessness situation, I mean, so much structural racism and all of that. And for those people say you're pulling the race card, yeah, I'm pulling the race card. I just began, the book today, The Color of Law. I mean, this has been systematic in how things were set up to put us against each other. And I think for too many people, I agree with the hopelessness statement, because for too many of us, there is a sense of hopelessness. Why? Because we've been down for so long till getting up is not even on our mind. And so we need those of us that are assembled here to say to them, there is a way out. For those people who grew up in less than desirable conditions, you still have made it. And we've always been undesirable people. Even when it was we suffered and got on that ship as a result of people who look like us, who tricked, hoodwinked, bamboozled, and swindles to get us over there and got us where we are right now. But again, let's be careful that we, see the good that's happening within us and raise that up just as much as the press is giving us the negative portrayal of us.
And what you were talking about is non-hopelessness. Because we've been hopeless for so long, and then when the door opens for us to get out, we like, I don't think that's not going to happen. So we continue to stay in that environment that is disadvantaging us, even though the door is open. And so you really can't blame us for that either. And I love what you said, Dr. Hughes. One thing, we joke with each other, but it's all love. I love all Greeks, and I will defend all Greeks to the end. And one thing I can say is that, sometimes we're the ones that are holding the community together. We're the ones going out there in the community and fighting for and with those that may not have access, and they see us. And I always reject that notion that we're the ones that do the work to ourselves. I mean, that's a false notion. And then, the whole Willie Lynch thing, I mean, there's some issues with the authenticity of that whole, publication or whatever. And so I really don't put much stock into the whole Willie Lynch thing. I just think that we have to really look at what's happening in our neighborhoods. You know, even down to the whole myth of the absentee Black father. That the literature does, refutes that. I mean, the numbers refute that. You know, Black fathers are the most engaged of any demographic of fathers, and so we have to stop perpetuating those messages that say that we are the worst ones to each other. That's not the case.
But you're saying that that's the worst thing. But the reality is that that's what happens.
Whose reality?
It's our reality, because the reality is when you go when Black men go on jobs, it is usually how they end up walking out the door with their boxes. It is usually their own people. I'm a very prime example of what.
It's just your experience, though. They're more experienced than yours.
Absolutely. But when you put those experiences from you and 100 and 1,000 and 1,000,000 other Black people, we all fall in the same boat. So the question becomes the question because the question I'm asking tonight is the question that white America won't ask us. The question I'm asking right now is a question that white America thinks, but they won't ask. Even we think it, and we get into we get into the greatest discussion around the fact that we say, no, we don't do that to our own people. No, that's not what we do. But the reality of those that are those frontline workers, those essential workers, those are the people that are the ones that feel the more of the heat of that than those of us that have college degrees and maybe in prominent positions. So the fact is, why is it that we do that to one another, and then we but tonight I'm not being nice tonight. See, normally we have flowery discussions, but I knew the panel that was coming tonight, so I came ready because these are the questions. I know he's listening to this discussion tonight. One of my very dear friends, who is white, and this is what he says a lot. He loves us, but he questions questions, why do y'all do these things to each other? And then when it happens,
he's coming from a white supremacy lens, though. He's coming from his white supremacy, white privilege lens, and so he can't. No, yeah, he is. And so he bought into that bullshit.
It's amazing that you would say that, because what I say to him is, your thinking is that of white privilege. And so when you're saying, well, why are they out there protesting knowing that there's a pandemic out here? I said, we know that there's a pandemic. We're not stupid. We don't want to be out in the streets marching for anything, really. But we definitely in the middle of a pandemic, putting our health at risk. But at some point, you have to say, I know it's my health. I'm going to protect myself as best I can, but I have to get out here and march for inequity and equality, because if we don't, then how do you stop the next child, the next man, from becoming the next George Floyd?
Yeah, Doc, if I could jump in, I think one of the other issues that's so critical that I think we're missing too is the influence of our cultural differences due to geographic locations. The experiences of us here in the South may be very different from the experiences of those who are up the East Coast or in the North or on the West Coast or what have you.
Absolutely.
I think that our cultural, for lack of a better word, our cultural awareness of how we have gotten to where we are I think that may play a critical factor in this element of this discussion as well. And certainly, Doc, I know you're pushing the envelope. You ain't gonna get this answer tonight, and I think you know that. But I think what's so critical is that we've got to at least be willing to acknowledge that there is a systemic problem that exists. That problem exists throughout multiple systems, including those of socioeconomics, including those of family, including those of education, including those of the career and workforce. Those systems are in place. My biggest thing is that, in reference to the direct question you mentioned, why do we seem like we do it to each other? Is because I think that there's a lack of courage, a lack of courage to rise up against systems that might be causing us to acquiesce to what is normal, the things that have always been done. And instead, that's the reason why we've got so many diversity officers coming into play now. There's been a lack of movement in systems. So you go out and you find you someone who can perpetuate a movement. And in order to do that, you've got to have a different mindset to inject into the culture. So again, that's where I think a lot of this is coming from.
I have always had great opportunities given to me by white people. But when
it's been different.
But when it came to me getting those same opportunities from Black people, I did not get those opportunities. They found someone else who they ended up firing or letting go or left on their own. And when you could have had, now the difference is, on the flip side of that, as long as I kept my mouth shut and I stayed in my place and did not rock the boat, you could stay here and be in that position. But when you start to rock the boat and you start challenging the system, this is not a great fit for you. Or perhaps maybe you might be happier somewhere else. So we cannot focus on Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, and still do not want to have those elephant conversations in the room that, yes, we do have to own some of the things that happen to us, because some of us do it to each other. White people do not tell us to go shoot and kill our own Black men and have Black on Black crime. But you are correct, Dr. Ford, that yes, it does happen. Dr. Hughes, you're correct. The media does perpetuate more of what happens in our communities and less of what happens in more affluent communities that may be white or affluent with a diverse affluence to it. But at the end of the day, we need to own our own stuff. Because what happens when those lovely young men come into the schools and are out of control? Mr. Wells said it very eloquently. He has a way of bringing them around because he develops a relationship. Dr. Thomas said the very same thing. I develop a relationship. I believe that we don't do enough of that in our own communities, and we need to return back to that so that we learn how to get along, so that we learn how to support one another, so we learn how to help one another get to the next level. And when you get there, in this book that I wrote, I talk about the crawfish, because it's Louisiana, certainly, but I talk about that, the crawfish in the barrel, because the mindset is we pull each other down instead of lifting each other up. So I know firsthand, and you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Jackson, because geographically, my mindset is not that of a typical Southerner, because most of my time has been spent on the East Coast and up north, where it is more diverse and the mindset is very different. But coming back to Louisiana, bringing that same mindset has not worked out for me. Because why? We have a very Southern mindset. And so I love what Dr. Ford said. But what he said would not be applicable if he were working and living in the Deep South?
I'm from the Deep South, and I've worked in the Deep South before I came here, and I still haven't seen what you're talking about.
The point that I'm making, the point that I'm making is when you are in a different geographical place. When I was a principal and assistant superintendent on the East Coast, the way that we conducted schools, and Dr. Hughes, I'm sure you can attest to this, the way we conducted schools and the way we did business, when I came to interview for jobs right here in the South, in Louisiana, my state, these people looked at me like, where? And the question was asked, where is he from? We certainly cannot bring him in. I mean, he would come in and just totally transform my entire situation. No, I would come in and bring systems and structures, something that we don't have enough of, something that we need to implement in our own communities. And when we do that, then we're going to transform the mindset of those communities where our people will not want to do illegal drugs or whatever to survive, because they can't survive on making $8 an hour. So how do you expect him to feed his family? No, we don't want him to do illegal things, but how do you expect him to feed his family if he's underpaid and overworked? Certainly, that draws a whole different level. Mr. Wells, what is your thought?
So I believe we're in many different places. So let me try to bring us back as best as possible. You have to make people understand that you're good enough, and you have to also make them aware that they have to be resilient. And you also have to give the true mindset that unfortunately you may not be selected for even what you think you've earned and deserve. And what I think we have not began to touch about is about entrepreneurship, making sure that we have opportunities to bring in an additional residual income. We also have to make sure our young people understand that it's nice to have a job. It's nice to be salarized. It's nice to have all of the luxuries that come unto thee. But then there's also some realities of what other talents you have and how do you financially broaden the horizon with your talents. What happens in many communities is it's about me or you. Now, brother, I truly understand your story, and I know that I've been in Boston for a long time. But I will say this. When it comes to someone, black or white, they have to be very transparent about whether or not they're going to bring you on or leave you in the same space. And unfortunately, some of us, whether or not we want to acknowledge it, even our young brothers, we are very, very threatening, not only to them, but we're also very threatening to us.
Each other.
Everyone on this panel is probably at the top of their game. If not, they have a pedigree or paper that makes it seem like these brothers are some deep brothers. You have to be very, very comfortable in yourself. Now, I don't know what it's like to live in the Deep South, but I know most people do not welcome change. We're not welcoming COVID, and I'm a scientist, but I do know one thing about change. It's going to come, and we just have to be persistent. You are an extremely talented person, as well as the young people that we are also working with on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month. But we have to make them recognize the importance of being resilient. It would be nice to say that somebody's going to give us something, but when we were freed, Juneteenth as a reminder, and all that happened in other places, no one gave us much of anything. So we know we're not getting any handouts. Unfortunately, life may not be the rose garden that we think we deserve and earn with PhDs and all these other things. But the reality is we are all one of three. We're either cracked, broken, or shattered. And with that being said, we got to protect our young people to become resilient. So I hear what you're really saying, and my heart pours out to all these injustices. But the reality is this isn't going to change whether or not our employer is black or white. We have to make ourselves as best prepared as possible for our next game, next opportunity, or we have to make sure we have some options. And moving forward in 2020, the year of vision and revision, we need to do better.
Yeah.
So when these black boys walk into these schools in August, when they walk into these schools in August, what do you say to the parents? Because education is never ever going to be what it was. This is the first year of a whole new something new that none of us knows how it's going to play out. It was one thing that we had a pandemic and we were preparing to go back into schools for that. But then we had the death of George Floyd, which totally transformed the whole world, the way we think, the way we do. What do you say to that Black parent whose Black boy is going to go into school in August? What do we say to him in order to motivate him to understand all that has been happening? Perhaps we need to think about putting social justice into the curriculum and embedding some of that so that we can begin to have diversity training, so that we can have culturally conversations around what does all this look like. So if our kids were already feeling that maybe they were walking into places where they were not wanted, what do you say to those parents and those kids now?
So I have to remind everyone again, change is extremely uncomfortable. We are all animals. We all have to adapt. You cannot survive on this planet if you do not have the ability to adapt, brothers. We have to, in order to survive, the strongest has to adapt. So this reality in regards to what education is going to look like, what's surviving going to look like? You know, we're talking about education. What's surviving? There are going to be new jobs, new opportunities. There's going to be a whole new skill sets of things coming forth that is not even on print. We have to be realistic about doing things the way we used to do. This is a new norm. So if nothing else, we got to get our acts together, because we're going to have the people in front of us, around us, and among us asking these questions. But one thing I clearly know, change is inevitable. We have to adapt, and it's not going to be comfortable.
And if I can add to that right quickly, and I'll be very brief, right quickly, the importance of keeping your head about you. I think that's a key component as well. We spoke earlier about building relationships. In schools, that is absolutely going to be the key. We must build relationships with our young people. We must make sure that we are open to those conversations that are going to need to be had. And we've got to remind them, regardless of how high the pressure gets, keep your head about you.
School districts everywhere are working on some sort of re-entry plan. It just so happens that in our district, we have 14 teams, and I head the equity team. And so the priority, which is a national conversation with regard to students re-entering the schools, is to do just that, Dr. Mike, is to focus on the social and emotional well-being, because Black, white, Hispanic, rich, poor, all these kids are experiencing a measure of trauma. And so that's going to be first and foremost. And so that's why I can at least speak for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and that, you know, in the budget, we were very intentional about adding mental health supports by adding a couple counselor positions, some social workers, things like that, to make sure that we meet the needs of those kids, and also looking at equity, because one of the things that the pandemic has done is that it has given a greater measure of empathy, because we begin to have, you have the have and the have-nots, but some of the people who are typically having, we're now beginning to experience what having not is. And so for those kids who come from poverty, this situation that we were thrown into was what was unfortunately their norm. But some of the people who enjoyed a steady income all of a sudden found themselves in the food line as well. And so, I know through the equity office, I was sharing with the consultant yesterday, my office, we feel like we're drinking from a gushing hydrant with a straw, because so many people, teachers, administrators, are asking the question of how do we begin to have the conversation, especially around equity and looking at racial equity and making sure that we're giving the kids what they need. And so we have had a series of professional developments for the last 2 weeks where we've been talking about critical responsive teaching, social justice and education. We have the author of I'm Not Bad, I'm Just Bored. So when students come in and they're not focused on it, it's not so much that I'm bad, but I'm bored. And how can we change our instruction? How can we incorporate equitable practices within the instruction so that the kids become engaged, that they can see themselves in the curriculum? So we are actually doing that and will continue to go forward. And I would hope that other school districts are going to be doing the same, because you're right, education cannot be the same anymore. And we saw that when all of a sudden education looked like what we're doing right now. There was not someone sitting in front and you had to engage the students on a different level. So I actually, my former superintendent used to say to me all the time that, I'd say to everyone, you have to be comfortable with ambiguity. And right now we're walking to that, because again, all of us, it's a new norm for all of us. And I like, what the young man said with keeping your head about you. If you can keep your head and all about you, losing theirs and the blame on you, if you can trust yourself, but all without you, that's where we're going to be able to, we're going to have to see that in August. And I'm not a betting man, but if I were, I would say I doubt very seriously if those kids are going to be stepping into the building in August.
I'll add to that too, Counselor.
Dr. Ford, I saw your hand when we were talking about, when he mentioned about the mental health.
That's where I was going. That's where I was going. Yeah. And so, I would say, one thing I talk about is the stigma that our community has in regards to thinking a counselor, and we have to get over that stigma and employ, the use of licensed mental health professionals. And I want to emphasize licensed, whether it be a counselor, social worker, psychologist, or whomever. But we have to, look at and value those resources for us as adults and for our children and adolescents too, because the isolation can mess with your mental health. The sudden change can also mess with your mental health, and so we have to really seek those services out and look for counselors and social workers and psychologists that look like us. They're out there. There aren't that many of us, but we're available. So be able to seek those services out for us and for our children is going to be crucial for them to have some semblance of normalcy.
I know that you are in New Jersey, Dr. Ford, but speaking globally, what are some things that our parents, because a lot of our parents don't know, and a lot of them feel sort of embarrassed, they seek, mental health for themselves and or their children, but what could they do? It might, because a lot of our parents, depend upon their economic situation. And right now with COVID and all of this, a lot of parents are under a lot of stress right now because they've lost their jobs, or maybe they don't have as many hours, or maybe they were working in a building and now they're working at home, or maybe, they've had to change jobs. And the whole COVID-19 deal, as well as all of the social unrest in the United States right now, what could our parents do, or where can they go if they feel that maybe they need assistance, and or if their child might need assistance? What could they do?
Well, there is Psychology Today does list counselors in the area. You can say if you want a counselor who's Black African American, you can select that. There are resources like the National Association for Black Counselors. There's another resource, and so I would also suggest if you are in an area where there's a counseling university, that maybe contacting their counseling program, the counseling office. They may have some places that they can refer you to. So there are ways for you to find a licensed professional, and some professionals are doing pro bono work. I know in a lot of states they're offering emergency licenses to professionals. They're licensed in other states or whatever, and so Some places are relaxing their requirements for telemental health, and so there are there are places out there that could assist you to deal with those mental health concerns. I would say start with Psychology Today, and also if you're connected on Facebook, the National Association for Black Counselors is another resource that one could tap into to find a good, culturally responsive and counselor that's Black or brown.
Because a lot of our parents and a lot of our kids and families as well have lost relatives, loved ones, as a result of COVID and just a lot going on. And I know as Black people, sometimes we feel a little embarrassed about going, to seek help because we feel like maybe somebody's gonna label us as crazy. But I just want to make sure that our families know, because a lot of these kids are gonna need a lot of help. Black, brown, white, green, yellow, they're gonna all need help when they go back to school. And you're right, Dr. Hughes. I don't know what going back to school is going to look like in August, simply, and even at the university collegiate level, because with this virus now seemingly exploding again, we just don't know what that might look like. Before we go, I just want to say thanks again to all of our panelists. I have had a really great conversation with you guys tonight. Please like and share this video. But you all were talking just a moment ago, and I'm very concerned that a lot of our young Black and brown boys just, I don't know if they really understand, how do we help them to understand what all of this social unrest means for them? Not just in school, but also how do they embrace it in life? I'm used to walking down the street to Popeyes or to the corner store, or I'm used to going to my grandmom's house who's around the street, and a little innocent walk to the store, to buy some cookies becomes a whole nother issue. How do you help them, especially boys, deal with all of the social unrest that's going on, and how do they cope with that?
Listen, I think the first thing that has to be important there, one of the things we did in schools, is that we had to be in place of some of our parents. Kids would have schools, and the first thing that the teacher and the administration would have to realize or have to address is some of the social challenges, what's going on with that kid at home. So I would say that ways that needs to be addressed by our social service professionals and others is to remind our parents that the kid's going through something good. And while the parents are stressed, the parents are worried, the parents are this, that, the kids, and what's going to happen is they're going to show up at our doors, and they're going to have all this stuff in, because at some point in the game, they will have been told that they need to stay out of grown folks' conversation, or that they need to go sit down somewhere, or that they have not been listened to. And I think that's going to be a factor in their return to school.
Okay.
I think the young people are becoming a little more emboldened.
I'm gonna ask that mute. I'm gonna ask that maybe you mute so that, because I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Okay, great. I'm sorry, Dr. Hughes, go ahead.
I'm seeing actually that a lot of our young people are becoming empowered by the movement, and the young people are on the forefront and are very cognizant about what's going on. I have a nephew who is an 11th grader who is typically rather leisurely in his learning and not usually engaged, but I'm enamored by how in tune he is to what's going on the political front, and what the implications are and where they have a stake in this. and they're feeling empowered. So, I was just saying, that, we need to be reminded that a voteless people is a hopeless people, and that we need to get out there and make sure that we are empower our community to make sure they're leveraging that vote. So I think that they're very keenly aware of what's going on. There was a social media post where this little girl was speaking to some sort of legislative body, and she was crying and talking about the fact of why don't they like us. So the kids are very aware of what's going on. And so now this is the importance of the social justice education for these kids to understand and know why you sit in that civics class and what does that mean, to learn about government and what's going on. And let me tell you something, if you have not read The Color of Law, I'm just through chapter 1. And this thing going back to laws that have been enacted from 1883, that the Supreme Court chose to overlook, and again, to allow these structures to be in place, helping these kids understand that this is why you're learning what you're learning and the importance of writing and speaking well so that you can enact policies. Because I said, in a panel last week, another panel that I was a part of, that we need to make sure these protests end up going to help us go to the polls so that we can get people in there to make sure that we enact policy in which is going to make a change, because there's no reason to celebrate over statues coming down, and the statues that allow the statues to be erected are still in place. Because if we don't go from the protest to the polls to enact policy, that protest has turned into merely a parade, and we cannot allow that to be.
I think that you brought a very key point, and there are some people, but in particularly our Black people, a lot of them have been so discouraged in voting, although they should, but a lot of them feel like, well, why should I? My vote doesn't count. But we need to remind them, your vote counts. I was watching Roland Martin this morning, which I rarely watch Roland because I never get a chance to really see him. But he, his show is hot, and I mean, it's just hot. But he said something this morning that was so impactful. And on his show, he was talking about the vote list, not voting. But he said the very same thing, that if you don't get out and vote, and I'm glad you brought up that point about your nephew, because that's one of my points here, that education is going to look so different. I believe that so many of these children are going back to school with a whole different mindset. And some of them are going to challenge these teachers, not in a bad way, but they're going to challenge these teachers on why is it? Because I think people can say what they want, and this is just my opinion, but George Floyd changed the world. And George Floyd stuck something in the socket, and he has ignited something that was maybe there but not alive in a lot of us. And so the awareness that these kids are going to go back to school with in August, school systems need to be ready. Colleges need to be ready, because they're coming with a whole different mindset. And they are not going to, I don't believe they're going to march just for a parade. I really believe that they're going to make us put action behind the marching. And I salute them. And I mean, we don't really have it going on in our area, in terms of the way it is in the bigger cities. But the one that, the small one that we did have, I did attend. I caught the tail end of it because it wasn't really communicated in terms of what was going on in our community. But I really salute the people. I'm talking about the protesters. I'm not talking about the people who are doing the things that they shouldn't be doing. I'm talking about the protesters. They are fighting for all of us to have a different way of life. And so I can't say any more about it other than the fact that I really salute those young people, because you're right. They have hit the unconscionable in all of us, and they're going to hold us accountable. They're going to force it. And I want to salute, I can't think of his name, is the football player, the ball player.
Colin Kaepernick?
Yes.
Kaepernick.
Because let me tell you something. He started something.
You're right.
And it was a silent protests that he was made to feel like he had done something so wrong, and now there are those that have got to go back, eat a little crow, and say I'm sorry, because that's what Roland Martin. And if you don't get it, if you get a chance, please go back and watch his show from this morning, because he said, Black people, you have more power than you ever thought you had. If you don't think you have any power, then don't go to the what then our boys who are playing ball at these universities, leave those universities and go to an HBCU and see what's going to happen. What happened in Mississippi? The flag has come down because those athletes were not going to play at a school that was supporting white supremacy. And so now what do you see? You see that flag coming down, and Mississippi is the last state in the union to change their flag from being a Confederate flag. So what do you say about the power of the Black vote? What do you say about the power of that Black people have? We have more power than we ever gave ourselves credit for having. And so as long as we keep that mindset, then we're going to continue to move the trajectory around what is happening in the United States. And I really can't say any more about it other than the fact that I am really excited to see to see these things. Look at NASCAR. That, you know, so they can say what people can say what they want, but George Floyd, that unfortunately, I don't rejoice in the fact that he had to die. I'm very sorry about that, and I still continue to pray for his family. But he made the ultimate sacrifice. And it's ironic that he wanted to be a Supreme Court justice, and look at how he has transformed and caused transformation to happen. So final thoughts from you guys before we end the conversation. We really need a third conversation, but we're going to end it here for just a moment. And we're going to come back to that to this conversation. We're going to pick it up again. But just final thoughts for our viewers.
Well,
Dr.
I think access and what you say? Well, I think access and visibility is very important for us who are considered to have made it of some sorts, to show and display to our younger generation what they can be, what they can do, how to be better. And I think that we should always continue to live as we climb, and not, look down on or try to hinder others from progressing, especially our people. I think that's a major issue. But what I try to do is show the other Black males, you can be more than your situation, than your upbringing. Unfortunately, we're all not born with silver spoons. However, that's not your story, that's your journey. Okay, that's a part of who you are. So don't let that stop you. So access and visibility would be two important things that I think that we should focus on moving forward.
And if I can, I'll just say that I think we should focus on courage as well. We all have to become more courageous to stand up for our rights, to stand up for what we believe in, regardless of what circles and what environment we find ourselves in. We've got to have the courage to try to seek change in whatever situation we may find ourselves in, whether it be education, whether it be on our jobs, whether it be in a corporate C-suite, whether it be wherever it is. If the systems that are in place are not conducive for equity and equality for all, then we have a responsibility to do whatever we can to promote change within those systems. And I'll leave it there.
It's amazing that you would say that, Mr. Jackson, because Clarence says when people realize their power, they stop asking and start telling. And I think that's a great segue right into what you were just saying. Dr. Ford?
First of all, we I think that our Black students are going to go back with a sense of empowerment. One thing that we have to ensure that we are not serving them that same old watered down, colonized curriculum.
Please say that again. Please.
Yes, we got to stop serving them that same old watered down, whitewashed, colonized curriculum, because our students are becoming more, aware of who we are, and the fact that, like, what's my boy in Baton Rouge that went off at the school board? He said, what's his name?
Chambers.
Yes. He said, we built this thing for free. We built this. It was built on the blood of our backs, and then our inventions were stolen. And so we have to get back to letting them know that, hey, you come from a proud people and a talented people, and then giving them the tools to challenge the curriculum when the teachers are teaching, inaccuracies. And then
go ahead.
Those of us that have privilege, I believe that I have education privilege, and I'm in a space where I can advocate for more Black students. And so we have to come to the table and say, this is what I want to do. You all talk about diversity. I'm going to hold you to the fire. I have a way for us to get more diversity in here, more racial diversity, and have to have those conversations and come with a plan and say, this is what I need from you. I need some financial backing from you to do this. And I know that we have it. So, what's up? So we have to be able to go into those boardrooms and go to the dean's office and say, hey, this is what I want to do, and this goes with our strategic plan. Y'all say you're going to do this. How about we go ahead and do it? So whether that be if we are director or if we are faculty in a program and the program needs more Black students, then we as Black professors have to be able to say, this is what I want to do to get more Black students in here. If we're director of a program, you know what to do to get more Black students in there, and we have to do it. That's called leveraging our privilege.
You're absolutely correct, Dr. Ford. And Clarence is recommending Brainwashed, which I have read that book. Very, very, very good book to read. But we have got to demand that curriculums be changed to reflect the real world. It was Black people who really created the airplane, but it was stolen from them, and said that the Wright brothers did it. Well, they didn't do it, but that's what's taught in school. Just like Christopher Columbus did not discover America. Americus Vespucius discovered America, not Christopher Columbus. But that's what we teach in schools, and we keep teaching the same thing over and over and over again, wrong every time we teach it. And then when a student challenges, then we get upset because they have done their homework and we have not. We don't teach about the fact that the light filament, you wouldn't be able to look at light if it hadn't been for a Black person. The stoplight was created by a Black person. Your hairbrush was created by a Black person. Black people built this country and have not been given. Go to DC. You can see right there in DC all those monuments, the White House. And so it's a wonder that we were blessed to see a Black person living in the White House that was built by Black people. Dr. Hughes.
The Maasai tribe out of Kenya's greeting to each other is, how are the children? I think that's a question. That's how they greet one another. The idea being that if the children are doing well, then the community is doing well because our legacy rests with them. Ms. Mormon has an excellent comment in the chat section as she talks about the children at home, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of our kids. We're the only culture, I think, in which relies on the school system to do some of the jobs that we need to be doing in our homes and helping us to see the value of our people. And I was blessed to have that coming up. So how are the children is a question that we need to ask, because our kids are looking at us for some direction. And so we need to stop, some of these parents need to stop being the kids' friends and actually be the parents. And we need to understand that it does truly take a village to raise a child. And to leave you with an inspiring word, we need to remember that we cannot be not weary in well doing, for in due season we shall reap if we just don't faint. And many days I ask, and my prayer is, Lord, just don't let me faint.
Absolutely. I join you on that. Mr. Wells.
Yes, yes, yes. So I'm going to leave us with 5 simple words. The first thing we need to first do is acknowledge. And after we acknowledge, we have to appreciate that we are being allowed to acknowledge. And then you have to accept what you've now had the opportunity to acknowledge, appreciate, and then accept. And then you have to affirm the opportunities that were given before you. And last but not least, you have to applaud all 4 of those. So a lot of times in life, I ask people, what did you see? What did you think? And what did you wonder? Those are my 3 things I do with my nieces, my nephews, all my colleagues. What did you see? What did you think? And what did you wonder? And I simply use that in a lot of things just to open up conversations. And a lot of people ask, what did you do? What did you do today? What was your homework? Stop. Just ask them, what did you see? What did you think? And what did you wonder? And if you can get anyone to be able to stop and address those 3, what did I see? What did I think? And what did I wonder? Then you can begin having conversations. You don't have to have a master's. You don't have to have a doctorate. You just need to have those 3 statements. What did you see? What did you think? And what did you wonder? And that's a conversation in and of itself.
Absolutely. I want to thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedules, because I know that your schedules are jam-packed, and I know that you could have said no, and I know that you could have done something else, but I really appreciate genuinely you being with us tonight. I do again apologize to our viewers for coming on late. We had to deal with some unfortunate family situation at the hospital, and so keep our family lifted and keep us in prayer, because this is a very tough situation. I thank God for strength just to be able to come and do this show tonight, because this is very difficult what we're going through right now. But we know that, as Dr. Hughes says, we just don't faint. And so I ask that every day. Just don't faint, and even when I do faint, help me to get up and bounce back and start doing it all over again. I might faint 5 more times, but help me to get back and do it again. And so I really thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. To our viewers, thank you for your patience. Thank you for being with us tonight. We are coming back and have this conversation around kings, around educating and nurturing Black and brown boys. We're coming back and having that conversation. Folks, make sure that you do something good to help somebody, because you never know that what you do to help somebody might just help save a life. And to all of our viewers, thank you again. Please like and share this video. To our panelists, please like and share the video. Thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. Have a great night, and we'll see you again on Conversations with Dr. Mike.